Brit-Am, Hebrew Awareness, our organisation, we understand that the lost 10 tribes of Israel are to be found amongst Western peoples, and that the English-speaking peoples especially represent the tribes of Joseph. Now, there may be descendants of the lost 10 tribes of Israel in other areas, but in those regions that we spoke of, that is where they are concentrated, that is where they give expression to their Hebraic destiny, to what they had to do according to the Bible, according to the Word of the Almighty. And presently we're going to give a short talk on some of the blessings, how the blessings and the prophecies help prove this. We have other proofs. We have proofs from history, proofs from linguistics, proofs from reality, from present-day foreign affairs, present-day international affairs, by all kinds of comparisons, statistical comparisons, and so on. And from archaeology, from numerous fields of study that also confirm it, that come together, that correspond with the Bible says, and help us understand the Bible, and that all these different disciplines all come together and all interlock with each other. And proof from one is strengthened from proof from another field. Now, this present talk is going to be based on material found in this work, to rule the world, as well as on numerous articles on our website, and so that is what we're going to speak about. Now, we're going to speak about this. Now, we understand that there were 70 nations. In other words, you had the first man and woman, Adam and Eve, and they gave rise to humanity, but then the humanity as it then existed was wiped out, except for Noah and his family. From Noah and his family came the peoples of the earth as we now know them. And in Genesis 10 it lists the descendants of Noah, and lists altogether 70 nations, 70 peoples, and they are the forefathers of all the peoples in the world today. As we understand it, that is that we have, how many? We have 120 more than, I don't know, I've forgotten, more than 120 different nations in the UN. And we other peoples, and within these nations you have subgroups and peoples without representation. So you have a lot of national groups, but we said that they all boil down to 70. So sometimes you're part here, part there, part of them intermix with each other and creating new nations. But there were 70. One could say 70 mainstreams of population exist, to each one of which has a portion of its own of mankind today. So you have 70 nations. We also later on come across Abraham. Abraham was the first Hebrew. Abraham had sons and children. He had children from descendants. He had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. From Jacob came the 12 tribes of Israel. The brother of Jacob was Esau. Esau also had descendants. So too Abraham had other descendants. And he gave rise to Ishmael, the forefather of the Arabs, and then also the descendants of Keturah, other peoples, and altogether you get 70. You go down, but Abraham received the blessings and he passed them on to Isaac, and Isaac passed them on to Jacob, and Jacob ultimately had 12 sons, and these sons had grandsons, sons and grandsons. The 70 peoples went down to Egypt, and then as we find in the book of Genesis, and later on we find a list of the peoples or the tribal groups that come out of Egypt. There are 70 of them. In other words, there are 70 clans amongst the 12 tribes of Israel, and ultimately, in the future, these 17 clans, are going to rule over all of the earth and guide the rest of humanity, and for each clan there will be another portion of the non-Israelite nations attached to it, and they hit their responsibility. The descendants of Abraham were Isaac, Jacob, and from Jacob came 12 tribes, and these 12 tribes are eventually ruled over the land of Israel, and divided it up amongst them according to their tribes, until after the death of King Solomon, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, ruled, and in his reign, the time of his reign, the 10 of the tribes divided, separated, seceded, and set up their own kingdom, the own kingdom of Israel, which comprised the majority of the Israelite peoples at that time. And this entity was conquered by the Assyrians, and all of its inhabitants were taken into exile. This is proven not only does the Bible say it, but also archaeology proves that every known Israelite settlement of the northern kingdom shows signs of devastation in that period. It was all destroyed and all of its inhabitants taken away into exile. They were taken different portions of the Assyrian Empire. And some of them eventually moved by sea, across the sea to the west, almost soon afterwards. Others moved to the north to the foothills of the Caucasus Mountains, into Armenia and other regions. And from there they moved into southern Russia. And from southern Russia in stages they moved to the north and to the west, eventually converging in the west. So the two streams of migration converged in Western Europe and in the British Isles. And from the British Isles it populated the North America, Australia, New Zealand and other areas. So that is what we know. Now these 10 tribes who were conquered by the Assyrians and taken into exile, they disappeared, they lost consciousness of their ancestry. But they physically remained together, and they moved. They moved together as concrete entities, and even in some cases when they divided, separated, they reunited. As if guided by an unseen hand, they conquered each other, intermerged with each other at a later period, and they came back together, as the will of divine providence was. The Bible speaks of what will happen to the 10 tribes. What will happen to the 10 tribes of Israel? The Bible tells us that they will be the dominant world power. See Numbers 24, 2-9, Micah 5, 7-9, Deuteronomy 33, 27, 33, 29, Jeremiah 51, 20-21, that they would be the battle axe of the Almighty, that is a policeman of the globe. Jeremiah 51, 20, Zechariah 10, 7, they would defeat Edom, meaning Germany and powers of Europe. See Ezekiel 25, 14, Abijah 1 to 38, and other points are predicted concerning them. They would rule over other peoples. See Genesis 27, 29, 48, 29, Psalms 47, 3, they would be seafarers, 42, 10. A lot for the Gentiles, Genesis 12, 2-3, 18 to 19, 22, 18, Isaiah 42, 1, 42, 6, Amos 5, 14 to 15. And then they will be symbolized by a lion and a unicorn. And that is the coat of arms of Britain. See Numbers 24, 7-9. They were to be located at the ends of the earth, meaning the geographical extremities of the continental masses, and so on. And there are numerous other predictions that all show us that the English-speaking peoples were destined to take on the task given to the Lost Ten Tribes. It would be given to the Lost Ten Tribes because that is where the Lost Ten Tribes were to be found. That is where the Lost Ten Tribes were to be. We have Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh were the sons of Joseph. Jacob was renamed Israel. Jacob was renamed Israel. His favorite son was Joseph. Joseph became the ruler of Egypt and saved his brothers and saved the whole world from famine. And he, as if to say, is foreshadowed his descendants. He is a symbolic, ancestral symbol for his descendants, because what he did his descendants have also done in other ways. And as he ruled over the non-Hebrew peoples, when he was the viceroy in Egypt, and he saved the Egyptians and the rest of the civilized world from famine, so too as his descendants and his lost tribes done. Before he died, Jacob, that is Israel, Jacob, otherwise known as Israel, asked for Joseph to bring his sons to him and to receive a blessing from him. And he did, and he brought his two sons with him to Jacob. And he brought his sons Ephraim and Manasseh, in front of Joseph brought his sons to his father. But Jacob crossed his hands. But nevertheless, Joseph, from his point of view, had put Ephraim on his right-hand side, which is considered the most important. Because Joseph, too, realized that Ephraim was his continuation. It's an important point. Jacob, however, guided his hands wittingly to indicate that the greatness of Manasseh would not be revealed so soon. Jacob agreed only that Manasseh remained and is destined to complete the quality of Jacob himself in the building of the third temple. That is, Manasseh will help rebuild the third temple. We find several sources of that. Manasseh, sometime in the future, will help rebuild the temple. And he has an importance of its own for this and for other reasons. And we find Manasseh in the USA. It's Deuteronomy chapter 33:17. It speaks of the blessing that Moses gave to Ephraim and Manasseh. And in Hebrew it says, his glory is like the firstlings of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. For then he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. Deuteronomy 33:17. Actually, his words 10,000s can mean much more, millions, as we have shown elsewhere, and as we are quoting other authorities, bigger authorities, rabbinical authorities that mention this, without any connection to whether the lost tribes are in the West or not, but is pertinent to them. Now, looking at the Hebrew 33:17 of Deuteronomy, 33:17 Deuteronomy, this is an important point. It's worth your trouble waiting a little bit. That's the way it goes. Where we quoted, they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the 10,000s of Manasseh. In Hebrew, Haim Rivavot Ephraim, Haim Alpha Manasseh. How it is constructed, how it is written, it can be read to say they are. It can be read to say they are the 10,000s of Ephraim. Ephraim, Alpha, Manasseh, they're the 10,000s of Ephraim who are within Manasseh. That is a possibility of reading the Hebrew. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree with me on this one or not, if others disagree, it is a possibility within the Hebrew text. And it fits our understanding from other sources. In other words, we believe that the Ephraim is to be found, or gave expression to itself through the British. Manasseh through America. But physically, a good portion of America may be descended from Ephraim. Maybe the majority of Israelites in America come from Ephraim. But Manasseh is the one who sets the tone in certain features of American national characteristics. Manasseh is the one who sets the tone, even though a good portion of the Israelites in his domain are descended from Ephraim. And this seems to be indicated by the Hebrew text as it may be understood. So that is what we've been saying this for previously, but we did not realize that it was already indicated in the Hebrew text itself. And it's worth noting. We find in a rabbinical source, Kitab Kabbalah, Rabbi Yaakov Zvi Mecklenburg, 1785-1865, that this blessing, let my name be called upon them, all the patriarchal forefathers and their children of their children were known as Hebrews. And this blessing says that the descendants of Joseph would also be known as Hebrews. And where do we find the people known as Hebrews in history? Amongst the Celts. Amongst the so-called Celtic peoples. The Celts, that is a name found in Roman historians, the Roman historians applied to the peoples who lived in the area. They did not call themselves Celts. They called themselves Iberi, or Iberi, in Ireland, Iberi. And they have place names all over Ireland, all over Celtic Britain, with this word Eber, or in Wales, Aber, meaning the same as it means in English. In English, have the word over, to go over. It comes from the same root, because in Hebrew the same root, Iba, Abba, which gave rise to Ivri, Hebrew, also means the same, to move over. Abraham, the first Hebrew, was on the other. Also the word other is from the same root, on the other side, whereas the rest of the world were over the other side. So that is the name that they gave to themselves, that they called themselves, and that they were known by. This word Iberi, Aberi, is a Western way of expressing the Hebrew word Ivri, and it means Hebrew. So they call themselves Hebrew, and they're the only nation in the world that did that. So this too is a point of identification. You should also know that the 10 tribes were technically to be considered non-Jewish. It was if to say their spiritual adherence, their spiritual membership of the Israelite nation from a religious point of view had been suspended. The end times it will be renewed. But for the present is suspended. So in some ways they're non-Israelites. But nevertheless, the promises were given to them, promised to them physically, and they had to be fulfilled. And to a degree they were fulfilled in the time of the exile, which we may be coming close to the end of. We'll see what happens. But we should note that the prophecies prophesied had to be fulfilled and have been fulfilled historically. And this is proof as to who they are. It says concerning Joseph that his seed will be full of the Gentiles. That is, according to the translation, he will rule over other peoples. And that is what Joseph has done. That is an attribute of Joseph. This expression, Joseph rules over other peoples. The rest of the world cannot do without Joseph. This is the fullness of the nations. As it says, fullness of the nations, and his seed shall be full of the nations, give the nations their completeness, what gives them, makes them what they are. And Joseph has a task to fulfill. He has a task to fulfill. He has a task. The exile and the loss of identity was for a reason, a divine purpose for this. And in that place of exile, the seed of Joseph has a task to fulfill, and this task needs to be fulfilled. We need to fulfill it, and there's an injunction in Amos 6:15. Hate the evil and love the good, and establish judgment in the gate. It may be the Lord God of his hosts will be gracious unto the remnant of Joseph. In other words, hate the evil and love the good, and establish judgment in the gate. This is an injunction to the seed of Joseph, the remnant of Joseph.